The seal chamber was older than human civilization. The walls were covered in symbols that glowed with faint blue light, and in the center stood a circular platform covered in intricate patterns. Taman felt the power radiating from it, a thrumming energy that made his teeth ache. "This is where Tayson died," Valera said quietly, standing at the edge of the platform. He stood in the center and gave everything to power the seal. His life force became the barrier that held back the Devourers. Through the chamber's entrance, they could hear the sounds of battle. The Varathian guards were fighting desperately to hold back the Devourer creatures, but they were losing. Dark shapes flickered at the doorway, pressing forward with relentless hunger. "We don't have much time," Hyejin said, checking her scanner. "The seal is failing. I can see the dimensional cracks spreading. Soon the Devourers will be able to pour through completely." Valera moved to the platform and began preparing the ritual. Ancient words in a language older than either human or Varathian spilled from her lips. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter. "The process is the same as before," she said, and Taman heard the pain in her voice. "Someone must stand in the center. Someone with the bloodline connection. Their life force will be consumed to reinforce the seal." "Then I'll do it," Taman said, stepping forward. He had known this moment was coming. From the first dream, from the first memory of Tyson, he had understood that this was likely his fate. "No." Hyejin grabbed his arm. "There has to be another way. Daehyun, your modifications, the technology combining human and Varathian systems, can't that help?" "Maybe," Daehyun said, working frantically at his portable console. "If we could distribute the energy load across multiple people instead of one. Share the burden. It's never been tested, but theoretically." "There's no time for theories," Valera said. Her eyes were wet with tears she was trying to hold back. "The Devourers are breaking through. Someone must make the sacrifice now." "Then let it be me," Valera continued, stepping onto the platform. "I have lived 5,000 years. I am tired. Let me join Tayson in whatever comes after." "Stop," Taman shouted. He climbed onto the platform and grabbed her shoulders. "This is exactly what's wrong. One person sacrificing for everyone else. That's not an alliance. That's not partnership. That's just loneliness wearing the mask of heroism." "Then what do you suggest?" Valera asked, and she sounded so lost, so ancient and weary. "We do this together," Taman said. He looked at the other bloodline carriers. Minji, Woojin, Jian, Bora, Hyun, and to his surprise, Hyejin stepped forward too. "I had Daehyun test my DNA," Hyejin said. "Turns out I have traces of the bloodline too. Distant, but it's there. If we're doing this together, count me in." "All of you?" Valera looked at them with disbelief. "You would all risk your lives." "That's what humans do," Woojin said with a grim smile. "We share the burden. We stand together. Isn't that what impressed you 3,000 years ago?" Daehyun was already working, pulling devices from his pack and placing them around the platform. "These will link all of you into a network. Instead of one person's life force powering the seal, it will draw from all of you, smaller amounts from each person. You'll survive but barely, and you'll be connected to the seal permanently. Part of your life force will always be maintaining it. So we'll be guardians," Taman said, "forever tied to keeping the Devourers sealed." "Yes," Daehyun confirmed. "Is that acceptable?" Taman looked at the others. They were all afraid. He could see it in their eyes. But they all nodded. Minji spoke for them. Better than being dead, and better than letting everyone else die. "Let's do this." Valera started to protest, but Taman placed a finger gently on her lips. "You're not alone anymore. You don't have to carry this by yourself. Let us help. Let humanity be your true partner, not just your protected children." The ancient Empress closed her eyes and 2 tears ran down her pale cheeks. Then she nodded. "Very well, but I will anchor the ritual. I will guide the energy, and if anything goes wrong, if the burden becomes too much for you, I will take it all into myself." "Fair enough," Taman said. He positioned himself at the center of the platform, and the others arranged themselves in a circle around him. Daehyun's devices hummed to life, creating a web of energy between them. Outside, the sounds of battle grew worse. A Varathian guard stumbled into the chamber, wounded. "They're coming through," he gasped. "We can't hold them much longer." "Begin the ritual," Taman commanded. Valera's voice rose in that ancient language again, but this time it was different. She was not calling for one sacrifice, but 8 offerings, one network of shared strength. The symbols on the walls blazed with brilliant light. The platform beneath them began to glow. Taman felt the pull immediately. It was like something was reaching inside him, taking threads of his life and weaving them into something larger. He gasped with the pain of it, but he held firm. Around him, the others were experiencing the same thing. Their faces twisted with effort, but none of them broke the circle. Then the real challenge began. The Devourers sensed what was happening, and their consciousness pressed against the seal. Taman felt it like a pressure on his mind, a vast and hungry intelligence that wanted only to consume. Images flooded through him. Not just darkness, but the absence of everything, the end of all light, all warmth, all life. "You cannot stop us," the Devourer consciousness whispered directly into his thoughts. "We are entropy. We are the end of all things. Surrender and we will make your death swift." "No," Taman said aloud, though his voice was strained. "You're not inevitable. You're just another problem. And humans solve problems." He pushed back against the darkness with his own memories, not Taysen's ancient battles, but his own life. Growing up on Earth, learning to be a diplomat, meeting Hyegen and Dahyun, standing on the bridge of a ship and seeing alien stars for the first time. Hope, curiosity, friendship, love, all the things that made life worth living. The others did the same. Minji showed her memories of flying through asteroid fields, the thrill of freedom among the stars. Woojin shared his strategic mind, the satisfaction of solving complex problems. Hyegen offered her scientific wonder at discovering alien life. Each person contributed something unique, something human, and Valira added her own weight to their effort. 5,000 years of memories, not just battles and losses, but beauty too. Sunsets on a dozen worlds, art created by species long gone, the face of a human warrior who had called her friend. She showed the Devourers that life, despite its pain, was worth preserving. The seal began to change. Instead of just pushing the Devourers back, it transformed into something new. A barrier that did not just separate dimensions, but actively reinforced the structure of reality itself. The crack sealed not temporarily, but permanently, but the cost was terrible. Taman felt his life force being pulled out of him in a steady stream. He could hear the others crying out in pain. They were dying, all of them, giving too much too fast. "No," Valira said, and her voice carried power that made the chamber shake. "I said I would not let you die. I meant it." She did something Taman did not fully understand. She took the energy drain from the ritual and channeled it through herself first. She became the filter, the buffer that protected the humans from the worst of it. The ancient Empress screamed with the agony of it, but she held firm. The ritual completed. The seal snapped into place with a sound like thunder, and Taman felt the Devourer consciousness cut off completely. The barrier was whole again, stronger than before. But this time it was not held by one sacrifice, but by 9 people working together, connected forever by threads of shared life. Taman collapsed onto the platform, gasping for air. Around him the others fell too. Only Valira remained standing barely, her face pale even for a Varathian. "Is it done?" Minji asked weakly. "It's done," Valira confirmed. She looked at them all with something like pride. "You did it. The seal is permanent now. The Devourers cannot break through as long as you live. How long is that going to be?" Woojin asked, checking his own pulse. "I feel like I aged 20 years. "You will live normal human lifespans," Valira said. "But part of your life force will always feed the seal. You will tire more easily, recover more slowly, but you will live." Outside, the sounds of battle changed. The Devourer creatures were disappearing, pulled back through the sealed dimensional cracks. The invasion was over. News from the space battle reached them soon after. With the seal reinforced, the Devourer fleet had begun to collapse. The ships flickered and vanished, returning to whatever dark dimension they came from. The combined human and Varathian forces had won, but the cost had been high. Many ships on both sides were destroyed. Admiral Jehun survived but was injured. Thousands of people, human and Varathian, had died in the battle. Cassian's sacrifice was only one among many. In the weeks that followed, Earth and the Varathian Empire began to build a real alliance. Not based on ancient debts or genetic memories, but on mutual respect and shared sacrifice. Diplomatic channels opened. Trade agreements were discussed. Cultural exchanges were planned. Valira no longer spoke as an empress commanding subjects, but as a partner working with equals. She and Taman established a joint council to oversee cooperation between their species. For the first time in her long life, the Varathian fleet was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Hundreds of ships, each looking more like living creatures than machines, gathered in orbit around the homeworld. Their dark hulls seemed to drink in starlight, and strange energies flickered along their surfaces. Taman stood on the bridge of the flagship beside Valira, watching as more vessels arrived every hour. "This is every warship in our empire," Valira said quietly. "Everything we have. If we fail, the Varathian people will have no defense left." "Then we won't fail," Taman said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. But convincing Earth to accept help was harder than expected. When the Varathian fleet arrived in the Sol system, human military forces nearly attacked them. Only Taman's direct communication with Admiral Jihoon prevented a disaster. "You want us to trust vampires?" Jihoon said over the video link, his face skeptical. "Beings that feed on life energy. How do we know this isn't an invasion?" "Because the alternative is worse," Taman said firmly. "Admiral, I've seen what's coming. The Devourers don't invade. They consume. Everything. Every human, every planet, every star. The Varathians have fought them before. We need them." The argument went on for hours. Earth's government was divided. Some leaders wanted to reject alien help and face the threat alone. Others understood that humanity was not ready for this kind of enemy. Finally, after Taman shared everything he had learned, including the historical records from 3,000 years ago, Earth agreed to form an alliance. But there was little time for celebration. The Devourer scouts were already probing Earth's outer defenses. Small ships, if they could be called ships, flickered in and out of normal space. They looked wrong somehow, as if they were made of darkness that had learned to move. When human missiles hit them, the weapons simply vanished, consumed. "They eat energy," Daehyun explained to the assembled command staff. "Kinetic weapons work better, but even those are only partially effective. The Devourers exist partially outside our dimension. To truly hurt them, we need weapons that can reach across dimensional barriers. Like Varathian life energy weapons," Valira added. She stood beside Taman at the planning table, and her presence made many of the human officers uncomfortable. But Jihoon, to his credit, focused on the mission. "How long until the main force arrives?" the Admiral asked. "Based on the energy patterns, 3 days," Yijin said. She had been analyzing the data constantly. "And when they come, they'll bring everything. This won't be scouts. This will be an army." Taman knew they needed more than just military strength. They needed the people Hyejin had discovered in her research. Other descendants of the ancient warriors who had fought beside Tayson. People who carried the same genetic memories who might be able to help reinforce the seal. "We need to find them," Taman told his team. "Scatter across human space if we must. Find everyone who carries the bloodline." The search began. Hyejin used the research from Varathian archives to identify family lines that had descended from the original warriors. It was like searching for needles in a haystack of billions, but they had help. Lord Cassian had kept records, watching certain human families across the centuries. They found Minji Han on a freighter near Jupiter. She was a cargo pilot, tough and independent, and she thought they were crazy when they first explained why they needed her. But that night she dreamed of battlefields and ancient faces, and she knew the truth. She joined them. Wu Jin Kang was harder to convince. He was a soldier in the Korean military, and he did not believe in genetic memories or ancient wars. But when Valira touched his hand, his eyes went distant and he saw through the eyes of his ancestor. He saw the warrior who had fought beside Tayson, a strategist who had planned the final battle. After that vision, Wu Jin stopped arguing and joined the group. There were others. A scientist named Jiyeon, a teacher named Bora, a young artist named Hyun. 7 people in total who carried strong enough bloodline connections to potentially help with the seal. They gathered on the flagship, and Taman felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier. These people were trusting him with their lives. Meanwhile, political problems continued. Lady Morvenna had not given up her opposition. She gathered her supporters and made one final attempt to seize power. She claimed that Valira was leading the empire to destruction, that they should abandon this sector and save themselves. "The Empress has become weak," Morvenna announced in the Grand Hall. "She values these humans more than her own people. She would sacrifice us all for the memory of one dead mortal. I challenge her right to rule." In Varathian culture, such challenges were serious. If enough nobles supported Morvenna, Valira could be forced from power. But before the vote could be taken, Lord Cassian stepped forward. "I am the oldest warrior in this empire beside the Empress herself," Cassian said, his voice carrying through the hall. "I fought in the ancient war. I stood beside Tayson, and I say this. The humans did not abandon us when we needed them 3,000 years ago, even though we were strangers, even though we offered them nothing but the chance to die fighting our enemy. They stood with us. Now they face the same threat and you suggest we run? They are weak," Morvenna said. "They will drag us down with them. Weak?" Cassian laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "I have watched humanity for 3,000 years. I have seen them survive ice ages, plagues, wars that killed millions. I have seen them split the atom, reach their moon, and build ships that cross the stars. They did all of this in less time than some of us take to wake from sleep. They are not weak. They are persistent, and that persistence might be exactly what we need." The speech swayed many nobles, but Morvenna still had supporters. That night she made her final move. She tried to sabotage the flagship's power core, intending to cripple the fleet before the battle. But Cassian had anticipated this. He caught her in the act. The fight between them was brief and brutal. Morvenna was strong, but Cassian was a warrior who had survived 5,000 years of conflicts. He disarmed her and held his blade to her throat. "You were always ambitious," Cassian said sadly, "but I never thought you would betray us like this." "I am trying to save us," Morvenna hissed. "Can't you see? This is suicide." "No," Cassian said. "This is honor. This is remembering what we truly are, not just predators who feed on others, but people capable of loyalty and sacrifice." He looked over at Taman, who had rushed to the scene with Valira. "The humans taught us that once. I will not forget the lesson." He brought his blade down not to kill but to wound. Morvenna collapsed and Cassian stood over her, breathing hard. Blood ran from his side where she had struck him during the fight. Taman rushed forward to help him, but the old warrior waved him off. "I am fine," Cassian said, though he clearly was not. "But you, Captain Park, you must focus on the mission. The location of the seal has been confirmed. It is hidden in a pocket dimension accessible only from Earth's moon. You must reach it and reinforce it before the main Devourer fleet arrives." "We will," Taman promised. "Together," Cassian smiled. "Together, yes, just as it should be." Then his eyes closed and he collapsed. The wound Morvenna had given him was worse than he had admitted. It was poisoned with something that attacked his life force directly. Valira knelt beside her oldest friend, and for the first time, Taman saw the ancient Empress cry. "Stay with me," she whispered. "You have been by my side for 5,000 years. Do not leave me now." Cassian opened his eyes one last time. "I am old, my Empress. I am tired, but I am happy, because I know that what we built 3,000 years ago still lives. Tell the human, tell Taman, that Tayson would be proud." Then the light left his eyes and the ancient warrior died. The death hit everyone hard, but there was no time to grieve properly. The Devourer fleet was detected at the edge of the solar system. Hundreds of ships, maybe thousands, all flickering in and out of normal space. They looked like holes in reality, darkness given form and purpose, Earth's forces mobilized. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. The Varathian fleet took up positions alongside them. It was strange to see human vessels of metal and circuits flying beside alien ships of organic design, but they flew together, united against a common enemy. Admiral Jehoon commanded the human forces while Valira led the Varathians. Taman stood between them on the flagship bridge, serving as the link between two species. The bloodline carriers were with him, ready for what came next. "The seal chamber is on the lunar surface, hidden beneath the crater Tycho," Valira explained. "We must get Taman and the others there while the fleets hold off the main force." "That's suicide," Jehoon said bluntly. "The moment we engage, the Devourers will tear through us. Then we buy as much time as we can," Valira said firmly. "This is why we are here. This is why both our people exist. To stand against the darkness." Daehyun had modified a shuttle with both human and Varathian technology. It was fast, heavily shielded, and carried weapons that could hurt the Devourers. The 8 bloodline carriers boarded it, along with Valira and a small guard force. As they prepared to launch, Jehoon contacted Taman one last time. 3,000 years ago my ancestors fought beside yours, the Admiral said. Taman realized with shock that Jehoon must also carry distant bloodline traces, though not strong enough to help with the seal. The training chamber was deep beneath the palace, in rooms so old that even the Varathians had forgotten when they were built. The walls were covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Taman stood in the center of the room, trying to calm his racing heart. Valira circled him slowly, studying him like a sculptor examining raw stone. "The memories are locked inside you," she said. "Your human mind has built walls to protect itself from the past. We must tear those walls down." "How?" Taman asked, through pain, fear, and effort, the same way Tayson learned to fight. She gestured, and Lord Cassian entered the room carrying what looked like ancient weapons, swords, spears, things Taman recognized from human history but made of materials that seemed to shimmer with their own light. "You will fight, Cassian," Valira said. "When you are pushed to your limits, when your conscious mind can no longer think, the memories will surface. Your body will remember what your mind has forgotten." "I'm not a soldier anymore," Taman protested. "I'm a diplomat." "You were a soldier once," Valira said. "And Tayson was a warrior. That knowledge is in your blood. Find it." Lord Cassian picked up 2 curved swords and tossed one to Taman. The captain caught it awkwardly. The weapon felt both strange and familiar in his hands. Cassian took a fighting stance, and suddenly his presence changed. He no longer looked like a formal advisor, but like a predator ready to strike. The fight was brutal. Cassian moved with speed that seemed impossible, his blade coming at Taman from multiple angles. Taman blocked desperately, relying on his military training, but it was not enough. Within minutes he was on the ground, breathing hard, sword knocked from his hand. "Again," Valira said coldly. They fought again, and again, and again. Hours passed. Taman lost track of how many times he was knocked down, disarmed, or struck. His muscles screamed. His mind grew foggy with exhaustion. But Valira never let him rest for long. "You are thinking too much," she told him after the 10th fight. "Stop trying to remember what you learned in human military school. Let Tayson guide your hands. I don't know how," Taman shouted in frustration. "Then learn," Valira said, and gestured for Cassian to attack again. Something broke inside Taman during that fight. His exhausted mind could not keep up with Cassian's attacks anymore. The conscious part of him that planned and thought simply shut down. And in that moment of emptiness, something else rose up. His body moved without thought. The sword in his hand became an extension of his arm. He saw Cassian's attack coming not by watching, but by feeling it in his bones. He blocked, countered, and actually made the Varathian warrior step back. For 3 seconds, Taman fought like someone else. Then his conscious mind returned, shocked by what just happened, and Cassian immediately knocked him down again. But Valira was smiling. "There, you felt it. That was Tayson." Over the following days, the training continued. Taman learned to access those moments more and more. He began to remember things he had never learned. How to fight with ancient weapons, how to read an opponent's body language, battle strategies from a time before writing. But it was not just combat training. Valira also exposed him to Varathian essence, the life energy that her people fed on. It was uncomfortable, like having electricity run through his veins. But Taman found he could tolerate it better than most humans would. Tayson had built up a resistance during the war, and that resistance was coded into Taman's genes. While Taman trained, Daehyun worked on technology. The engineer had been given access to Varathian databases and was trying to understand their systems. He worked with young Varathian scientists who were curious about human methods. Together they began designing weapons and shields that combined both technologies. "The key is harmonization," Daehyun explained to Hyejin one evening. "Varathian tech uses life energy as a power source. Human tech uses more traditional power, but if we can make them work together, we might create something stronger than either alone." Hyejin continued her research in the archives. She discovered more details about the ancient war. The Devourers were not simply monsters. They were beings from another dimension where entropy ruled. They consumed energy because in their home reality, there was none. They could not be killed in traditional ways because they were not truly alive. The seal that Tayson helped create, Hyejin told Taman during one of his rare breaks. It works by using life energy as a barrier. The Devourers can't cross it because they're the opposite of life. But seals weaken over time, and this one has been in place for 3,000 years. But not everyone supported what was happening. Lady Morvenna, a high-ranking Varathian noble, began speaking against the Empress's plans. She gathered other nobles who agreed with her. "We should flee," Morvenna argued in the council chambers. This sector is doomed. We are the Vorathian Empire. We have ships. We can leave and rebuild elsewhere. Why should we risk everything for these primitive humans? Lord Cassian confronted her. Because 3,000 years ago, those primitive humans saved us. We owe them a debt. Tayson paid that debt with his life, Morvenna shot back. We owe them nothing more. The Empress is blinded by sentiment and old memories. She is going to destroy us all for the sake of one human who reminds her of a dead friend. The argument spread through the Vorathian court. Some nobles agreed with Morvenna. Others supported the Empress. The unity that Valera needed was beginning to crack. One night, Hyjin was attacked in the archives. 3 Vorathian nobles, supporters of Morvenna, tried to steal her research and likely kill her. She fought back with the weapon Daehyun had built for her, a device that emitted bursts of light that hurt Vorathian eyes. But she would have been overwhelmed if Cassian had not arrived. The old warrior moved through the attackers like wind through grass. Within seconds, all 3 were on the ground, disarmed. He looked at Hyjin with concern. Are you hurt? I'm fine, she said, though she was shaking. They wanted my research on the seal. Morvenna grows bolder, Cassian said darkly. This cannot continue. He brought Hyjin to the Empress immediately. Valera listened to the report and her face became cold with anger. Morvenna will answer for this, but we cannot afford division now. The Devourers will not wait for us to settle our politics. That same night, Valera had a private conversation with Taemin. They sat in her personal chambers, a room surprisingly simple for an Empress. She looked tired, and Taemin realized that immortality did not mean unlimited energy. I have lived for over 5,000 years, Valera said quietly. I have seen civilizations rise from nothing and collapse into dust. I have watched every person I cared about die of age while I remained. Do you know what that does to someone? I can't imagine, Taemin said honestly. It makes you numb. It makes you stop caring because caring hurts too much. After Tayson died, I told myself I would never become attached to another mortal being again. Their lives are so brief, like candle flames. Beautiful, but gone in an instant. She looked at him with eyes that held oceans of sadness. But here you are, and I find myself caring again. I am terrified of watching you die like I watched him die. Taemin moved closer and daringly took her cold hand in his warm one. Then help me survive. Not as Tayson's echo, but as myself. Teach me everything you know. Let me become strong enough to face the Devourers and live. Valera stared at their joined hands for a long moment. Then she squeezed gently. I will try, but you must understand the ritual that sealed the Devourers required a sacrifice. I do not know if we can change that fundamental rule. Then we'll find a way to change it, Taemin said firmly, because that's what humans do. We break rules. We find solutions that shouldn't exist. You said yourself that's why you chose Earth. A small smile crossed Valera's face. Tayson said something similar once. Perhaps stubbornness is coded in human genes as surely as his memories. The training intensified. Taemin pushed himself harder, accessing Tayson's memories more deeply. He began to lose track of where Tayson ended and he began. The ancient warrior's personality was strong, and sometimes Taemin found himself thinking in patterns that were not his own. It was frightening. Hyjin noticed the change. You're different, she told him bluntly. You move differently. You talk differently sometimes. You're becoming him. I know, Taemin admitted. I can feel myself slipping. But I need his knowledge. I need to be strong enough. Not at the cost of yourself, Hyjin said fiercely. Taemin Park is my friend. He's my captain. I don't want to lose him to a ghost. Her words anchored him. That night, when the memories threatened to overwhelm him, Taemin focused on who he was. Not a tribal warrior from 3,000 years ago. Not an echo of the past. He was Taemin Park, born in Seoul, raised in a world of technology and peace, trained as a diplomat. He carried Tayson's memories, but he was not Tayson. The realization helped. The next day, when he fought Cassian, he moved with Tayson's skill but Taemin's strategy. He lost the fight, but Cassian looked impressed. You are finding balance, the old warrior said, honoring the past without being consumed by it. Tayson would be proud, but time was running out. The spatial anomalies that Hyjin had been tracking were growing worse. Strange energy readings appeared throughout the sector. And then came the transmission from Earth. Admiral Jihoon Song's face appeared on the screen, and he looked grim. Captain Park? The diplomatic vessel cut through the darkness of space like a silver needle through black cloth. Captain Taman Park stood on the bridge, watching the alien world grow larger in the viewport. His hands were steady behind his back, but his mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. This was humanity's first meeting with the Varathian Empire, and everything had to go perfectly. "Captain, we're receiving docking coordinates," said Lieutenant Heejin Choi from her station. She was the ship's xenobiologist, and her eyes gleamed with curiosity. Behind her, Engineer Daehyun Kim worked quietly at his console, checking the ship's systems one final time. Taman nodded. "Take us in slowly. Let's not give them any reason to think we're aggressive." The planet below was strange and beautiful. It had no bright sun overhead, only a dim red star that cast everything in shades of crimson and shadow. The cities looked ancient, with towers that stretched impossibly high into the atmosphere. Everything about this place whispered of age and power beyond human understanding. As their shuttle descended through the atmosphere, Taman felt a chill run down his spine. It was not fear exactly, but something else, something he could not name. He pushed the feeling aside and focused on his duty. Earth needed this alliance. Humanity had finally reached the stars, but they were young and vulnerable. The Varathians controlled this entire sector of space. Making friends with them was crucial. The shuttle landed in a courtyard made of black stone that seemed to drink in light. Tall figures in flowing robes waited for them. Their faces were pale, almost white, and their eyes reflected the red light like cats. These were the Varathians, and up close they looked both beautiful and dangerous. "Stay close and follow protocol," Taman told his team. Yijin and Daehyun fell in step behind him as they walked down the shuttle ramp. A tall Varathian stepped forward. His voice was smooth and cold. "I am Lord Cassian, advisor to Her Imperial Majesty. You will follow me to the throne room. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not touch anything. Do not stare at the nobility." The warnings made Taman's jaw tighten, but he simply nodded. They were guests here, and guests followed the rules of their hosts. The palace interior was like walking through a cathedral built by giants. The ceilings vanished into darkness above. Statues of warriors and strange beasts lined the halls. Everywhere, Varathian nobles watched them pass with expressions that mixed curiosity and hunger. Taman realized with a cold certainty that the briefings had been correct. These beings were predators, and humans were very much prey in their eyes. Finally, they entered the throne room. It was vast, with hundreds of Varathian nobles standing in perfect silence along the walls. At the far end, raised on a platform of dark crystal, sat a throne. And on that throne sat the Empress. Even from a distance, Taman felt the weight of her presence. She was smaller than he expected, but something about her made the entire room feel like it was bending toward her. As they walked closer, he could see her more clearly. Her skin was so pale it almost glowed. Her hair was long and black, falling around her shoulders like a waterfall of shadows. Her eyes were the most striking feature, shifting between deep crimson and bright gold. Empress Valera watched them approach with an expression of mild interest. Taman had studied diplomatic procedure for months. He knew exactly what to do. Stop 10 paces from the throne. Bow at the waist. Wait for permission to speak. He did everything correctly, but then something unexpected happened. The Empress stood up. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Varathian nobles exchanged shocked glances. Lord Cassian's eyes went wide. Apparently the Empress did not normally stand for visitors. Valera descended the steps from her throne slowly, her robes flowing behind her like liquid darkness. She walked past Hyejin and Daehyun without a glance. She walked straight to Taman and stopped directly in front of him. Up close, she was even more striking. Her face was perfect and ageless, but her eyes held a depth of time that made Taman feel like a mayfly by comparison. She was not tall, only reaching his shoulder, but he felt small before her. The Empress reached up and placed one cold hand against his cheek. Her touch sent a shock through his entire body. It was not painful, but it was intense, like touching a live wire. Her golden eyes locked onto his, and Taman felt like she was looking not just at him, but through him into something deeper. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear enough for the entire throne room to hear. "I know you. Human." 3 simple words, but they crashed through Taman's mind like thunder. For a moment he felt dizzy. Images flashed through his thoughts. A battlefield under strange stars, creatures of shadow and hunger, a woman who looked like Valera but wearing armor, fighting back to back with someone. The images were gone as quickly as they came, leaving only confusion behind. "Your Majesty," Lord Cassian said carefully, "perhaps we should proceed with the formal silence." Valera did not raise her voice, but the single word cut through the air like a blade. Cassian immediately stopped speaking. The Empress continued to stare at Taman, her expression unreadable. "The human delegation will remain as my guests. This one will stay by my side." She said it not as a request but as a fact. Taman felt Hyejin tense behind him, but he raised a hand slightly to signal her to stay calm. Whatever was happening, fighting it would only make things worse. "As you wish, Your Majesty," Taman said, keeping his voice steady. "We are honored by your hospitality." Valera finally removed her hand from his face, but she continued to study him. "You carry something old within you, Captain Park. Something I have not seen in many, many years." She turned and walked back to her throne, but before sitting, she looked at him one more time. "We have much to discuss, you and I. Lord Cassian will show your companions to their quarters. You will dine with me tonight." It was not an invitation. It was a command. As Lord Cassian led them from the throne room, Taman could feel the stares of every Varathian noble burning into his back. Hyejin leaned close and whispered, "What just happened?" "I don't know," Taman admitted quietly, "but I think we're about to find out." That night, Taman was escorted to a private dining chamber. The room was smaller than he expected, almost intimate. Valera sat at one end of a long table, and she gestured for him to sit at the other end. Between them was food, human food, which surprised him. "I had it prepared specially," Valera said, answering his unspoken question. "I do not eat as you do, but I am not so poor a host that I would let you starve." They talked for hours. Valera asked him questions about Earth, about his life, about humanity's dreams for the future. She listened with an intensity that was both flattering and unnerving. But she offered little about herself in return. As the night grew late, Taman finally dared to ask the question that had been burning in his mind. "Your Majesty, what did you mean when you said you know me? We've never met before." Valera was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight of ancient sadness. "Not you, perhaps, but I knew someone who lived in your blood, long before your civilization built its first cities." She stood and walked to a window that looked out over the dark landscape. "Tell me, Captain, do you believe in debts that last across ages? In promises that bind the dead to the living?" Taman did not know how to answer that. Valera turned back to him, and in the dim light she looked almost vulnerable. "Sleep well tonight, Taman Park. Tomorrow I will begin to show you truths that your species has forgotten, and you will understand why I have waited 3,000 years for you to reach the stars." That night, back in his quarters, Taman could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw strange visions. Battles and blood. A man who looked similar to himself, but dressed in primitive armor. And Valera, always Valera, younger somehow, fighting alongside the ancient warrior against things made of living darkness. When he finally slept, he dreamed of a war he had never fought, in a time before he was born. The morning light on the Varathian homeworld was barely brighter than Earth's twilight. Taman woke feeling exhausted, his mind filled with fragments of dreams he could not quite remember. But the emotions remained, a strange mix of grief and determination that did not belong to him. Hyejin was waiting for him in the common area of their guest quarters. She looked worried. "Taman, what's going on?" "The Empress has never acted this way before, according to Lord Cassian. He's been her advisor for over 200 years, and he says she's never shown this much interest in any visiting species." 200 years? Daehyun looked up from his datapad, startled. "How long do these beings live?" "A very long time," said a voice from the doorway. Lord Cassian stood there, his expression unreadable. "Her Majesty has granted your scientists access to our historical archives. Lieutenant Choi, if you wish to understand what is happening, I suggest you begin your research there." Hyejin's eyes lit up despite her worry. Access to an alien archive was every xenobiologist's dream. "I'll start immediately." "Taman, will you be okay?" "I'll manage," Taman said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Learn what you can. We need information." As Hyejin left with Lord Cassian, Taman was summoned once again to meet with the Empress. This time she was waiting in a private garden that somehow grew plants despite the dim red sunlight. The flowers were strange colors, purples and blacks and deep blues. They looked beautiful and poisonous at the same time. Valera stood among the flowers looking almost peaceful. When she saw Taman, she gestured for him to walk with her. "Do you remember anything from your dreams?" she asked without greeting. Taman hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Fragments, battles. Someone who might have been me but wasn't, and you fighting alongside him." "His name was Tayson," Valira said softly. "He was a leader among your people when humanity still lived in tribes and built with stone. He was brave and clever, and against all odds he became my friend." She touched one of the dark flowers gently. "It has been 3,000 years since he died, but I have never forgotten him." "Why do I see his memories?" Taman asked. "Because you carry his blood. You are his descendant, perhaps his great-great-great-grandson 100 times over. And before he died, I performed a ritual that bound his essence to his bloodline. It was meant to be a gift, a way for his strength to live on in his children's children. I did not know if it would truly work. But here you stand, and I can see him in your eyes." Taman felt a chill despite the warm air. What happened 3,000 years ago? Why would you do such a thing? Valira was silent for a moment, then began to walk along the garden path. Taman followed. "There was a war," she said finally. "A war against something that threatened all life in this region of space. We call them the Devourers. They came from beyond, from the spaces between dimensions. They consumed everything, light, heat, life itself. They could not be reasoned with or stopped." She led him to a stone bench and sat down. Taman sat beside her, listening carefully. "My people fought them for decades. We are strong, Captain. We have lived for thousands of years. Mastered technologies your people have not yet dreamed of. But the Devourers kept coming and we were losing. In desperation, I searched for allies among the younger species. That is when I found Earth." "Earth?" Taman felt his breath catch. 3,000 years ago, humans barely had organized civilization. "Yes," Valira nodded. "You were primitive by galactic standards. But I saw something in your species that others did not. You were adaptable, creative, and above all, you refused to give up even when facing impossible odds. I met with your tribal leaders and offered them a choice. Help us fight or be consumed when the Devourers eventually reached your world. And Tayson agreed? He did more than agree. He rallied the tribes. He learned to fight alongside my warriors. And when the final battle came, when we needed someone to complete the sealing ritual that would trap the Devourers in their dimension, he volunteered." Valira's voice grew heavy with old pain. "The ritual required a sacrifice, a life given willingly to power the seal. I tried to stop him. I told him I would find another way. But he refused." Taman could almost see it in his mind. A battlefield covered in darkness, strange ships in the sky, and a man who looked like him, standing in the center of a glowing circle, giving everything he had to save 2 worlds. "He died?" Taman asked quietly. "He died," Valira confirmed. "But before he went, I bound his essence to his bloodline. I promised I would watch over humanity, ensure that his sacrifice was not wasted. Then I entered hibernation to recover from the war. When I woke, centuries had passed. Your people had spread across Earth, built nations, reached for the stars. I watched from afar, keeping my promise. Why bring us here now?" Taman asked. "After all this time, why reveal yourself?" Valira turned to look at him, and her eyes were filled with worry. "Because the seal is weakening. The Devourers are returning." Meanwhile, in the archives, Hyejin was making discoveries of her own. The Varathian records went back thousands of years, written in a language that the computer could only partially translate. But she found references to Earth, to humans, to something called the Great Sealing. Lord Cassian stood nearby watching her work. "Is it true?" Hyejin asked him. "Did you fight alongside ancient humans?" "I did," Cassian said. "I was much younger then, only a century old. Tayson was a good man. He taught me that strength is not about how long you live, but what you do with the time you have." Hyejin pulled up astronomical data that the Varathians had been monitoring. Her blood ran cold. "These energy readings, they're the same as what's described in the records about the Devourers." "Yes," Cassian said grimly. "They have been growing stronger over the past year. The Empress knew this. That is why she invited humanity to make contact. She needs Captain Park. Why him specifically? Because his connection to Tayson is stronger than any human in generations. The seal was built using a human life. To repair it, we may need human blood again." Hyejin stood up so fast her chair fell over. "No, absolutely not. We're not sacrificing Taman." "I said we may need it," Cassian replied. "The Empress has not yet decided. But understand this, Lieutenant. If the seal fails completely, The Devourers will consume not just this sector but Earth itself. Every human, every life on your homeworld. Your captain understands this even if he has not yet accepted it. That evening, Taemin met with his team in their quarters. He told them everything Valera had revealed. Daehyun looked thoughtful, Heejin looked furious. She wants you to die like this Tayson did, Heejin said flatly. That's why she brought us here. We don't know that for certain, Taemin said, though part of him wondered if she was right. But we do know the threat is real. I've been having these dreams, these memories. They're getting stronger. I can feel what Tayson felt. The Devourers are real and they're coming back. Then we find another way, Daehyun said firmly. We're human. We solve problems. That's what we do. There has to be a solution that doesn't require you dying. That night, Taemin stood in his room looking out at the dark sky. He felt Tayson's memories stirring in his mind again. The ancient warrior's feelings were clear. He had been afraid, yes, but he had also been certain. Some things were worth dying for: family, friends, the future. But Taemin was not Tayson. He was his own person living in his own time, and he had to believe that humanity had grown enough, learned enough to find a better way. A soft knock came at his door. When he opened it, Valera stood there. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than she had in the throne room. "May I come in?" she asked. Taemin stepped aside. Valera entered and looked around the simple room. "I know what you must think of me," she said. "That I am using you. That I see only Tayson when I look at you. Aren't you?" Taemin asked, not unkindly. Valera smiled sadly. "Perhaps at first, but I am beginning to see Taemin Park as well. You are different from him. More cautious. Less willing to rush toward sacrifice." She turned to face him. "I do not want you to die, Captain. But I needed you to understand what we face. The Devourers will return, and when they do, someone will have to stand against them. Then we'll stand together," Taemin said. "All of us. Human and Varathian. That's what Tayson would have wanted, isn't it? Not one person's sacrifice, but all of us united." Valera studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps that is the lesson I should have learned 3,000 years ago." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Sleep well, Captain. Tomorrow your training begins. If you are to face the Devourers, you must learn to access Tayson's knowledge fully. It will not be pleasant." After she left, Taemin lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in his blood, in his genes, an ancient warrior's memories waited. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, an ancient enemy was stirring. The real challenge was just beginning.